A little girl just looked at him and said words no one should ever hear. "Hi, sir. My mom has a tattoo just like yours." That moment shattered everything Michael thought he lost forever. What happens next will change his life and theirs forever. Watch until the end. Welcome back to Heartwoven Tales. I'm your storyteller, Selena. I'm so curious, where are you listening to me from today? Make sure you watch till the very end and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. Now, let's dive in. The storm outside roared like 1,000 wild beasts, hammering rain and wind against the bakery windows, shaking the panes with a relentless fury, lightning splitting the sky in jagged bursts of white, casting fleeting shadows over the deserted cobblestones, and Michael Russo stepped inside. The bell above the door jingling faintly, announcing his presence like a quiet warning, even soaked to the bone. He radiated a cold, commanding aura that seemed to push the world away, every patron freezing mid-step, eyes instinctively drawn to the sharp, dangerous lines of his face, the suit dark and tailored to perfection despite the storm. His coat hung heavily from his shoulders, dripping onto the worn wooden floor, yet he did not notice, never noticing anything that wasn't necessary. Not the smell of freshly baked bread, not the chatter of a few braver souls, not even the flicker of the neon sign outside, struggling against the rain. For he had walked streets drenched in fire and blood, brokered deals with men who feared death more than anything else, yet something in the stillness of this bakery made the hairs on his neck rise. Before he could even think about removing his coat, a small hand, a hand so delicate it seemed like it could shatter if squeezed, reached for his wrist, and he froze. The touch was soft but insistent, almost reverent, anchoring him in a way nothing had in years. A little girl, no older than 5 or 6, with hair like spun sunlight and eyes that dared the world to challenge her, stared straight into his storm-dark gaze, pointing, trembling only slightly from excitement or perhaps a child's innate fearlessness, at the tattoo inked along the side of his neck, the old Russo vow sigil. It was not just a tattoo, it was a statement, a promise, a weapon hidden in ink, one only 4 living people had ever carried, each a soul bound to the Russo legacy, and his pulse stuttered for the first time in decades. "Hi. Sir, my mommy has a tattoo just like yours," she said, her voice a gentle melody cutting through the thunder and the storm, innocent yet impossibly precise. And the words crashed over him like cannon fire in a silent hall, Michael's heart skipping, tripping, and freezing mid-beat, for the tattoo was not something one stumbled upon. It was not a design one simply chose. It belonged to a history he had thought buried, to a promise made long ago in fire and blood. Only one woman in existence, only Sarah, had ever shared that mark with him, and Sarah was supposed to be dead. He could feel the world narrowing, his vision sharpening in disbelief, his throat tightening, his hands clenching into fists, yet he could not move, time slowing, the storm outside seeming to hush, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for his next word. "What did you just say, sweetheart?" His voice ragged, rough with disbelief and something else. Hope he had tried to bury beneath years of ruthlessness. The girl blinked, her bright eyes not faltering, her tiny chest rising with steady courage. "My mommy has a tattoo just like yours," she repeated, simple, innocent, yet explosive in the air between them, and the impossible became possible. Michael felt every nerve in his body ignite, memories he had buried clawing their way to the surface. Sarah's laugh echoing through hallways of abandoned warehouses, the firelight dancing in her hair, the feel of her hand in his during moments no one else could survive. Could she be alive? Could it be? The little girl's eyes held none of the hesitation, none of the fear that filled Michael's own heart, fearless in a way only children could be. Yet carrying the weight of the revelation she unknowingly delivered, each word from her lips, a spark against the dry timber of his years of grief, threatening to ignite everything. Michael's gaze dropped to the tattoo again, the intricate lines, the careful curves, the symbol that bound him to her. He traced it with his mind, remembered the day it had been etched onto his skin, the blood and sweat and whispered vows that had accompanied it, having believed it dead just like Sarah, having mourned her like a man shattered beyond repair. Yet here, in the hands of this tiny messenger, the past reached out with fingers of fire. He took a step, cautious yet urgent, the floorboards creaking beneath his polished shoes, the storm rattling the windows, echoing his heartbeat, feeling the cold bite of fear alongside hope. Unable to comprehend how or why, only knowing that everything had changed in the span of a breath. "Show me your mother," he whispered, low, almost a growl, yet trembling like a reed in the wind. The little girl's lips parted, her tiny brow furrowed in curiosity and excitement as she considered his words, a giggle escaping her, nervous yet thrilled, as if she understood that this man was different from all the others who walked the streets of their city, different from all the monsters children learned to fear. Michael's eyes never left her, every instinct, every muscle in his body screaming that this was no accident, that this moment was a pivot upon which the rest of his life would turn, feeling the weight of years of loss, the scars hidden beneath his clothes, the unspoken fears, all pressing against him at once. He could hear the faint creak of a chair behind the counter, the subtle hum of the refrigerator, the sound of rain drumming in the gutters. But nothing distracted him from the child standing there, the girl who carried Sarah's presence, her warmth, in ways words could never convey. The storm outside intensified, the wind shrieking, the lightning flashing. But inside the bakery, Michael Russo stood rooted, every breath measured, every second stretching like an eternity, waiting for confirmation that what he dared hope was true. The girl's tiny hand lifted again, pointing toward the back door, as if understanding the urgency in his voice, the depth of the unspoken question. Where is she? Michael's chest tightened, his mind racing back through the years of violence, loss, and ruthless survival, every decision, every alliance, every betrayal leading to this moment, and yet the question remained, jagged and raw. Was she truly alive, or was this some cruel twist, a shadow of the past mocking him? He clenched his jaw, pulse hammering in his ears, feeling something he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Vulnerability, raw and trembling, a faint sob threatening to escape, but he swallowed it down. There was no room for weakness. Not yet. The little girl's eyes held his, unwavering, innocent, fearless, and in them he glimpsed a reflection of the woman he had loved and lost, a fragment of hope so delicate it could shatter with a single misstep. Michael's hand itched to reach for the back door, to pull it open, to see for himself the truth that had eluded him for 5 long years. Yet he paused, breathing slow and deliberate, knowing that whatever lay beyond that door could either heal him or destroy him entirely. The storm outside raged on, a mirror of the chaos swelling within him. He took another careful step forward, the sound of his shoes sharp against the floorboards, whispering once more, almost to himself, almost as a prayer, "Show me your mother, now." The girl's tiny fingers pointed unwaveringly toward the back door, her eyes gleaming with anticipation, Michael's chest tightening further, his pulse racing, and in that moment he realized the truth he had buried in the ashes of the past. Some promises, some connections, could never truly die. A final clap of thunder shook the bakery, rattling the windows, and in that electric moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath alongside him. The first step toward the unimaginable truth was about to be taken, and Michael Russo was ready, though he did not yet know what awaited him. Every instinct screamed danger, every memory clawed at his mind, but he was willing to risk everything for the faintest chance that the woman he loved and the life he thought was lost might still be waiting. And so, with a single glance at the fearless little girl holding the key to a past he thought gone forever, Michael Russo moved toward the back door, his heart a storm within a storm, the door handle cold beneath his fingers, the sound of the storm outside muted as if the world itself was pausing. And then a faint, almost imperceptible sound came from behind the door. A gasp, a whisper, a life he thought was gone. Michael Russo's fingers lingered on the cold door handle, the faint gasp from behind the door echoing in his ears like a sound ripped from the depths of his nightmares and hopes combined, his chest tightening as every muscle in his body screamed for him to move, to finally confront the impossible, yet also warning him that the truth might shatter everything he had built from steel and fire. The little girl, Binta, stood beside him, her tiny hand brushing against his sleeve, her fingers sticky with muffin crumbs, the scent of sugar and warmth in stark contrast to the storm raging outside and the tempest in his heart. And she looked up at him with a smile so pure, so unguarded, that it both calmed and terrified him, because in that smile lay a piece of Sarah, a piece of the life he had believed lost forever. He swallowed hard, feeling the grit of fear, hope, and disbelief mix in his throat, his pulse hammering in his ears as his hand finally pushed the door open, hinges creaking like a muted scream, the soft hum of the storm outside fading into the background, replaced by the scent of flour, sugar, and something else. Something familiar, something achingly human that pulled at memories he had buried beneath years of grief and ruthlessness. Binta stepped forward first, small feet making quiet taps against the wooden floor, each tap a heartbeat, a countdown to the confrontation he both longed for and feared, her eyes sparkling with innocence as she led him deeper into the warm, dimly lit bakery, crumbs clinging to her tiny fingers, her voice chirping like a bird. "My name is Binta," she said almost casually, unaware that with those words she was ripping open the darkest grave in Michael's heart, laying bare old scars, old regrets, and old love he had thought forever buried. "And Mommy's name is Sarah," she added, the words striking him like a knife straight to the lungs, twisting and cutting in a way that made him stagger inwardly, his jaw tightening, his mind flashing back to the woman he had lost, the woman who had vanished during the ambush meant to kill him, the woman whose death had been confirmed by whispers, rumors, and enemy taunts, the woman whose absence had hollowed his soul and made him a man carved from vengeance and grief. His chest constricted, the air thick with the weight of 5 long years, and he felt his knees weaken slightly, though he did not allow himself to stumble, forcing his legs to carry him forward, each step deliberate, measured, as if treading across a minefield where one wrong movement could undo him entirely. The storm outside faded into insignificance, the bakery around him blurring into a haze of warm light and shadows, until all he could see, all he could hear, was the tiny guide beside him, leading him toward a truth he both craved and dreaded. His fingers clenched into fists, nails biting into his palms, his mind racing through every possibility. Every scenario, every way he had imagined this reunion, and every way he had feared it could turn tragic. And yet each memory was overlaid by the sound of Binta's voice, sweet and untainted, calling out the name that haunted him most, Sarah. The syllables reverberated through him, each one a lightning strike across the empty halls of his heart, igniting memories of laughter, whispered promises, shared dreams, and the night that had torn them apart, a night soaked in fire, blood, and betrayal, leaving him to wander the world with a body hardened by violence, but a heart still secretly searching, hoping, longing for the impossible, her survival. He whispered, voice rough and ragged from the storm within. Where is she? And for a heartbeat, time froze, the universe holding its breath. The bakery silent except for the distant patter of rain against the roof and the faint creak of the floorboards beneath Binta's small feet. The little girl, unbothered by the gravity of the moment, pointed toward the back door with a carefree smile, the sort of smile that belied the weight of her role in this unfolding miracle. And Michael felt a shiver run down his spine, a mixture of anticipation and terror, clawing at him as he stepped closer, every movement deliberate, every breath measured, his eyes scanning the shadows for threats, for signs, for confirmation that what he dared hope might actually be real. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm he tried to project, and he paused, listening, straining his ears, catching every subtle sound, every creak and whisper and breath, his senses stretched taut like a wire. Waiting for the moment the door would open the past and the present into one irreversibly shattering revelation. With each step toward the back door, Michael felt time stretch, every second elongated into a heartbeat of suspense, the storm outside a distant roar compared to the tempest inside his chest, every nerve on edge, every thought a knife slicing through his memories. And yet he could not stop, compelled forward by the pull of the girl, by the echo of Sarah's name on the tip of his tongue, by the possibility that the woman he had mourned, hunted for in his mind, and dreamt of at night, was standing just beyond that door, waiting or fearing to see him again. Binta's small fingers tightened around his sleeve, pulling him ever so slightly, and he noticed how fearless she was, how certain, as if she carried some silent understanding of what he needed to see, to hear, to feel, guiding him toward the impossible reunion that had haunted his nights and dreams for half a decade. Michael's breaths came in shallow bursts, his chest rising and falling rapidly, each inhale filled with anticipation, each exhale trembling with the terror of disappointment. And he remembered every detail of Sarah he could, the curve of her smile, the light in her eyes, the warmth of her hand in his, the way she had moved, the sound of her laugh. And he wondered if the woman behind that door would even be the same, or if the years, fear, and survival had changed her beyond recognition. The storm outside crashed again, lightning illuminating the kitchen through the frosted glass, and he flinched as if expecting the light to reveal some hidden danger. A trap? Or a lie? Yet he kept walking, each step a defiance of fear, each heartbeat a declaration that he would know the truth, no matter the cost. The air grew warmer as he approached, the scent of flour and sugar mingling with a faint, more personal perfume, a fragrance that tugged at his memory, familiar and impossible all at once. His hand hovered over the doorknob, fingers brushing the cool metal, and he felt a tremor run through him, the weight of 5 years of absence pressing down like an anvil on his chest. Binta's small hand slipped into his, gripping him with an assurance that belied her age, and he felt a strange calm settle over the storm raging inside him, a fragile thread of hope he dared not break. The door creaked softly as it opened, and a sound, a breath, a movement, a gasp, floated through the gap, almost ethereal, almost unreal, and Michael's knees threatened to buckle as he tried to ground himself, the reality pressing against the edges of disbelief. His eyes scanned the dim space, searching for a figure, a face, a presence, anything that could confirm the miracle he had longed for, and yet every shadow seemed to dance, teasing him with glimpses and half-seen movements, teasing his mind with the uncertainty of hope and fear intertwined. He whispered her name, barely audible, a tremor in his voice betraying years of repressed emotion. Sarah? And the air seemed to quiver, charged with the electricity of memory and longing, the kind that could ignite a heart or shatter it in an instant. Binta squeezed his hand, her eyes gleaming, urging him forward, and he stepped further, every muscle coiled, every sense alert. The bakery shrinking around him until the back room dominated his world, a threshold between the past and the present, between loss and reunion, between despair and hope. A faint movement caught his eye, a shadow shifting, and Michael's pulse jumped, the years of instinct and survival screaming warnings, yet the tenderness in his chest, the memory of the woman he had loved, overrode the fear, driving him to confront whatever waited, to claim the truth he had spent 5 years searching for, and to face the consequences of hope finally answered. The storm outside raged, but inside, Michael Russo's world had narrowed to a single doorway, a single breath, a single truth. The child guiding him, the name on her lips, the sound behind that door, the possibility that Sarah was alive and that the life he thought was gone forever might still be within reach. Every step brought him closer to the edge of revelation. Every heartbeat thrummed with tension, and every muscle screamed for him to stop, yet he could not. He was drawn forward by love, by loss, by the pull of destiny itself, toward the moment that would either heal his shattered soul or crush it entirely. The final inch brought his hand to the door, the metal cold beneath his fingers, the faint gasp he had heard earlier now clearer, the sound trembling with recognition, surprise, and fear. And Michael felt his breath catch, his chest constrict, the world narrowing to that single, impossible, breathtaking truth. The woman he loved, the woman he thought dead, the woman who had haunted his nightmares and dreams, might finally be standing just beyond the doorway, waiting for him. The shadows shifted, a soft rustle of fabric, the faintest whisper of movement, and Michael's chest seized as a voice, fragile, trembling, and achingly familiar, escaped from the darkness behind the door, a sound that made time stop and the storm outside fade to silence. And he knew that nothing in his life had prepared him for what he was about to see. 3. Michael's hand lingered on the cold door handle, every nerve in his body taut with anticipation, the faint sound of Sarah's breath, or what he thought might be hers, echoing like a fragile chord through the air, and then, with the faintest creak, the door swung open fully under the weight of his trembling grip, revealing the dimly lit interior beyond, and in that instant, time shattered. The world seemed to stop, the storm outside fading into a dull roar, the bakery around him dissolving into shadow and light, leaving only the impossible truth standing before him. Sarah. She was there. Her hair had grown longer, cascading down her shoulders with a softness that belied the harshness of the years she had survived. Her eyes deeper now, pools of pain and endurance, yet still holding that spark, that fire that had once burned straight into his heart. Her smile, though faded, carried echoes of warmth he had thought lost forever, and the presence she radiated was magnetic, pulling at every fragment of his fractured soul, every scar etched into his chest, his neck, his heart. Michael froze for a heartbeat, overwhelmed by the sight of her, the sound of her breathing, the reality of her survival clawing through his mind. And then, as if the universe itself could no longer contain the suspense, the cloth she had been using to wipe the table slipped from her hands, fluttering to the floor in slow motion, and she whispered, her voice trembling, fragile yet impossibly strong. "Michael?" The single word struck him with the force of a hurricane, breaking him and rebuilding him simultaneously, every thought, every memory, every longing coalescing into a single pulse of recognition and relief. His legs moved forward before he could think, a step instinctive and necessary, yet Sarah recoiled, stepping back instinctively, her eyes wide, a storm of fear and love warring within them. And for a fleeting second, he saw the little girl, Binta, standing nearby, her small hand clutching the crumbs of muffins she had carried, watching with silent understanding that something monumental was unfolding. "You weren't supposed to find me," Sarah whispered, each word a dagger wrapped in velvet, a confession that carried years of guilt, pain, and love, too deep for words. Michael's breath caught, shaking as he struggled to reconcile the reality in front of him with the memories that had haunted him through sleepless nights, every scar on his body suddenly feeling like a map that had led him to this very moment. "You died. I saw the fire. He began, his voice cracking, the words tangling with grief and hope, before she cut him off softly, painfully, with a truth that pierced him to the core. "I ran. To protect her." He glanced at Binta, standing silently yet confidently beside them, and back at Sarah. Every unanswered question, every sleepless night, every fear and every scar crystallizing into one unbearable and undeniable truth. The child, the little girl with her mother's warmth and his own blood, was real. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, the room vibrating with tension. The electricity of long-lost love mingled with fear, guilt, and hope. And for the first time in years, Michael felt vulnerable, exposed, and alive in a way that left his chest tight, his heart racing, and his mind both terrified and exhilarated. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers, his hands trembling at his sides, the instinct to protect, to claim, to hold, surging like a tide he had long thought lost. Yet she remained hesitant, every inch of space between them filled with the weight of years apart, of secrets kept, of survival and sacrifices made in silence. The storm outside pounded the windows in accompaniment, each clap of thunder echoing the chaos inside him, each flash of lightning illuminating the tension, the longing, the fear, and the love that had never truly died. Sarah's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came, only a tremor of breath, a flicker of hesitation, and the memory of every night he had cried himself to sleep haunted him anew. The nights he had mourned her as dead, the nights he had vowed vengeance on a world that had taken her from him, the nights he had imagined what it would be like to hold her again. And now she was here, alive, her gaze meeting his with a mixture of recognition, relief, and fear. And in that gaze, Michael felt all the years melt away, all the pain crystallize into one piercing truth. She had never stopped loving him either. The child, Binta, tugged gently at his sleeve, her small eyes looking from him to Sarah, silently asking questions he dared not yet voice, her presence both a bridge and a reminder, her innocence and courage illuminating the space between them. And Michael felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders, more profound than any deal, any fight, any choice he had ever faced in the ruthless streets he had walked. Every instinct screamed that this moment was fragile, that the balance between hope and despair was a hairline edge. He must tread carefully, and yet his heart demanded he move forward, that he claim what had always been his, that he protect, love, and never let go again. He drew in a shaky breath, voice raw and ragged as it forced itself past the wall of disbelief. "Sarah, is Binta mine?" The words, though simple, reverberated through the room like a gong, echoing off the walls, bouncing off the memories etched into every surface, and hanging there like a suspended truth, waiting, fragile and potent, for her answer. Time itself seemed to pause. The storm outside momentarily hushed, the bakery holding its breath alongside them, the air thick with tension, with the weight of history, sacrifice, and love, unspoken yet never broken. Sarah's eyes widened, her hands trembling slightly as she moved toward Binta, the smallest gesture carrying the weight of all she had endured, all she had sacrificed, and all the love she had carried silently for years. And Michael felt a surge of emotions: fear, hope, longing, relief, and the uncontainable pull of family that had been denied them for half a decade. His chest tightened, and he struggled to remain composed. His body taut with anticipation, every heartbeat echoing the question he had dared to ask, every breath a fragile thread connecting past, present, and future. Binta, sensing the gravity, pressed closer to Sarah, her small hands clutching her mother's, and Michael's heart twisted, knowing the truth he sought was bound with theirs, that the answer to his question would define the rest of his life, that the very air they breathed in that room was charged with the electricity of reunion and revelation. He noticed the subtle shifts, the tilt of Sarah's head, the flicker of moisture in her eyes, the slight quiver of her lips, and every detail tore at him, building anticipation, tightening the knot of suspense in his chest, warning him that the moment of truth was fleeting and precious. The bakery seemed to shrink around him, the storm outside reduced to a distant hum, the lights flickering faintly as if echoing the fragility of the instant, and Michael's mind raced with possibilities, scenarios, fears, and hopes, each one a thread in the tapestry of reunion he had dreamed of and feared in equal measure, every memory of Sarah intertwining with the reality standing before him, and yet the final confirmation, her words, her acknowledgement, her acceptance, had not yet come. His voice softened, almost a whisper, trembling with both longing and terror. Binta is mine. The question hung between them like fragile glass, reflecting the past, the pain, the love, and the infinite possibilities of what could come next, each second stretching like an eternity, each heartbeat marking the passage toward revelation. And in that space, Michael felt the weight of all he had endured and all he was about to embrace. Sarah's hands reached out slowly, trembling, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her lips parting as if to answer, and Michael's heart pounded so violently that for a moment he feared it might burst before the truth could be spoken, the truth that would either heal the wounds of 5 long years or shatter him again into pieces he wasn't sure he could survive. 4. Michael's chest tightened as Sarah's trembling hands reached for Binta, her lips quivering, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, the weight of years pressing down on every line of her face. And then, in a voice barely audible, fragile yet impossibly strong, she said, "Yes, Michael, she's yours." And the words struck him like a bolt of lightning, reverberating through his bones, his heart shattering and mending at the same time, a tidal wave of pain, joy, anger, and love crashing over him in a torrent too immense to contain. 5 years wasted, 5 years stolen, 5 years in which Binta had learned to walk, to laugh, to live, without the man who would have burned the world to keep her safe, and every memory of his absence came rushing back with suffocating clarity. The nights spent hunting shadows, the days consumed by deals, the endless, gnawing emptiness of knowing the child he might have held, nurtured, loved, had been somewhere, alive, yet unreachable, and the tears he had never allowed himself finally rose to sting his eyes. Sarah's voice trembled, raw and laden with guilt, as she explained the unthinkable. "If they knew I carried your child, they would have killed her. I had to disappear. I never stopped loving you, but I had to choose her safety over everything." Each word slicing through him, each pause a reminder of the unbearable burden she had carried alone. Every secret, every step, every decision taken in silence, hidden beneath layers of fear and necessity, and Michael's chest constricted with the magnitude of her sacrifice, his hands clenching, his knuckles white, as he struggled to reconcile relief and anger, love and guilt, longing and frustration. He stepped closer, voice low, raw, trembling with emotion. "You shouldn't have carried this alone." the words almost lost in the space between them, his heart thrumming like a drum in his chest, every muscle tense, every fiber of him alive with the intensity of reunion, yet weighted by the horror of lost time and stolen moments. And Sarah shook her head, eyes glistening, lips tight with pain and determination, whispering, "There was no other way." And in those few words, he understood every choice, every fear, every desperate step she had taken to shield their daughter from the dangers he had battled all these years. Binta clung to Sarah, tiny arms wrapped around her waist, looking up at Michael with wide, curious eyes, a reflection of innocence and trust that cut through the pain and reminded him of the life he had almost never known, the life he now had to fight for and protect. And the realization that he had been denied years of fatherhood tightened his chest, igniting a mix of love, rage, and resolve. Michael's gaze flicked between Sarah and Binta, each detail etched into his mind. The way Sarah's hair fell across her forehead, the slight quiver of her shoulders. The softness in Binta's eyes that mirrored her mother's. The way the child's small hands held onto her mother's, seeking reassurance and safety. And in that moment, he felt the weight of all lost years press down upon him, a mixture of grief and overwhelming love, and he silently vowed that nothing would take them from him again. Every instinct he had honed over decades of survival, every shadow and whisper he had navigated in the ruthless underworld, screamed for vigilance, yet the love in that room, fragile and undeniable, demanded tenderness, protection, and a surrender he had not felt in years. He ran a hand over his face, swallowing the lump in his throat, fighting the tears that threatened to fall, feeling both the ache of lost time and the sweetness of finally finding what he had been searching for in every alley, every warehouse, every corner of the city. Sarah, alive, and their daughter, real, tangible, and breathing in the same room. His voice softened further, a whisper carried more by emotion than sound. I can't believe it's you. I can't believe she's mine." And Sarah nodded slowly, the tremor in her hands speaking volumes, the weight of years in hiding evident in every gesture. Yet even through fear and exhaustion, a flicker of relief and love shone through, a light that had never died. The bakery around them seemed to blur, the storm outside a distant echo, as if the world had narrowed to that single room, to the three of them standing in the fragile, powerful embrace of truth finally revealed. And Michael felt his heart expand and contract simultaneously, a living paradox of longing and fulfillment, as if the universe had folded itself around that single moment, holding its breath alongside him. Every sound, the faint rustle of Binta's clothing, the creak of the floorboards, the soft thud of her little shoes, the subtle hum of the refrigerator, became amplified, each a drumbeat of reality, each a reminder that they were here, alive. And the past could no longer claim dominion over them. He stepped closer, reaching out tentatively, almost afraid to break the fragile equilibrium, every muscle coiled, every sense on high alert, yet each movement drawn inexorably forward by love, need, and the desire to reclaim what had been stolen from him, the family he had thought lost forever. Sarah's eyes met his, pools of pain and courage, and he saw every choice she had made, every secret she had carried, every sacrifice born of fear and love, and his heart ached with a combination of gratitude, sorrow, and longing so intense it made him feel alive and broken all at once. Binta's small hand reached for his, intertwining her fingers with his, a gesture of trust, recognition, and innocence that pierced through the layers of grief and anger, grounding him in the immediacy of their reality, reminding him that the tiny life they shared was now the anchor to all he had lost and all he still had to fight for. The warmth of her hand, the subtle pressure, the silent communication of belonging reinforced everything Michael had ever wanted and feared in equal measure: a family, real, breathing, alive, and within his grasp. He exhaled shakily, feeling the weight of 5 long years pressing down on his shoulders, memories of absence, loss, and separation flooding his mind, each one a dagger, yet each one making the reunion more exquisite, more necessary, and more unbearably powerful. And he finally whispered, voice breaking, "I will never let anyone harm you, either of you." Again. A vow heavier than any he had ever made in the underworld, heavier than any deal, any death sentence, any act of violence he had enacted, because this was not about power, control, or fear. It was about love, protection, and the family he had been denied for too long. And then, as if the universe itself sought to remind him that danger had never truly left his life, the bakery door chimed with a weight that sent a chill down his spine, heavy boots stepping across the threshold, echoing ominously through the room. The sound a stark, immediate intrusion into their fragile moment of reunion, the kind of noise that promised conflict, threat, and consequences that could unravel everything he had just found. And Michael's eyes snapped toward the source, muscles coiled, instincts sharpened, the warmth of Binta's hand in his, suddenly a spark fueling a protective rage as he realized the past was not yet done with them. The shadow of the intruders fell across the doorway, heavy and deliberate, and Michael's mind raced. Who had followed them? How much danger had Sarah's absence really bought? And could he protect them both when the storm of the underworld and the ghosts of betrayal pressed in from all sides? The first threat to his reclaimed family now standing in the room, their intentions as dangerous as the years of loss they represented. 5. The moment the bakery door chimed and heavy boots echoed across the floor, Michael's senses flared, every nerve on edge, the warmth and fragile hope of the reunion instantly threatened by the intrusion. Shadows fell across the room, elongated and deliberate, stretching toward them like dark fingers from the past he had tried to bury, and then 3 men stepped fully into the light. Their presence impossible to ignore, the air itself seeming to tighten around their predatory confidence. Each bore a ring, the glint of metal catching the flickering light overhead, and Michael's eyes locked onto the crest engraved on them. A broken, jagged version of the tattoo inked onto his own neck, a symbol of the Russo legacy perverted by betrayal. His chest constricted, rage simmering as recognition struck instantly. These were traitors from his own syndicate, men who had once called themselves allies, wolves who had tried to erase him from existence to claim his throne, to take what was his by blood and by right. Every instinct he had honed over decades, the fine edge between life and death, trust and treachery, screamed that these men were dangerous, that their intentions were clear, and that their presence here meant trouble unlike any he had faced in years. Their eyes scanned the bakery, sharp and calculating, locking first onto Sarah, then the child, then Michael himself, as if measuring, assessing, and deciding the value of each life in that room. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, smirked with the arrogance of men who had grown too comfortable in shadows, and his words cut through the tension like a knife. So the rumor was true. She lived. Every syllable dripped with malice, with a venomous glee that sent a cold wave through Michael's veins, making the hair on his neck stand on end, and he saw the instant effect of those words on Sarah. Her body stiffened, her arms instinctively pulling Binta closer, shielding her daughter as her eyes widened in fear. The tiny life in her grasp suddenly a lightning rod for danger she had fought so hard to avoid. Michael's muscles coiled, every fiber of his being ready for action, his gaze cold, calculated, deadly, the fire of vengeance roaring to life as he stepped forward, voice low, hard, and lethal, carrying the authority of a man who had been betrayed and survived. "You picked the wrong day." The words reverberated in the bakery, each syllable a challenge, a warning, a declaration that his enemies were about to learn the cost of touching his bloodline. The traitors sneered, leaning slightly forward, eyes narrowing as if daring him to act, their own confidence dripping in calculated menace. Yet one of them, lips curling in a cruel smile, spoke with chilling clarity. "We didn't come for Sarah. We came for the girl." The statement hit Michael like a punch to the chest, the words igniting a volcanic fury within him, vision narrowing, blood boiling, every instinct screaming that no one would ever touch his daughter while he still drew breath. In an instant, the world snapped. The warmth of the bakery, the fragile threads of reunion, the scent of sugar and flour all faded into irrelevance, replaced by the white-hot clarity of protective rage. Michael's vision turned red at the edges, every shadow sharpening, every sound amplified, the subtle shuffle of feet, the hiss of breath, the metallic glint of weapons, and his body surged forward, muscles coiled like a predator, reflexes honed by decades in the ruthless underworld, a force unleashed by blood and love. He could hear Binta whimper, tiny voice rising in fear, Sarah's sharp intake of breath cutting into his focus, and yet the instinct to protect, to destroy anything in the way, consumed him entirely. The leader of the traitors shifted slightly, raising a gun toward Binta, a deliberate, slow movement meant to provoke, to terrify, and Michael felt time stretch, every millisecond a heartbeat of tension, every second charged with the unbearable possibility of loss he could never forgive. His chest heaved, hands flexing, eyes narrowing, the world shrinking to the narrow line between the weapon and his daughter. Every decision, every reaction, every ounce of strength he had honed over years, coalescing into one pure, undeniable drive. She was his, and no one would take her from him. Binta screamed, a sharp, piercing cry that tore through the room, her small arms flailing slightly as fear overtook curiosity, and Michael lunged, every step fueled by primal instinct, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Yet the men reacted immediately, bullets beginning to trace lines through the air, the sound deafening, ricocheting off walls, shattering fragile fixtures, and Michael moved with impossible precision, blocking, dodging, and striking, every motion a testament to his years surviving violence, betrayal, and death. Sarah shrieked, clutching Binta, her body trembling, but Michael's eyes never left the traitors, his mind calculating, predicting, planning, a perfect storm of lethal force guided by raw emotion. The air was thick with gunpowder, sweat, and fear, the smell of bread and sugar mixing with danger, and Michael could feel every heartbeat, every pulse of life in the room, every breath charged with urgency as he became both protector and avenger, a force of nature impossible to stop when his family was threatened. The men's smirks faltered slightly as they realized the depth of Michael's resolve, yet arrogance kept them rooted, a fatal mistake, because he did not hesitate, did not question, did not falter. Every step he took brought him closer, muscles coiled, hands ready, eyes blazing with fury and love intertwined, a predator defending what was his by blood and heart. Binta clung tighter to Sarah, eyes wide, watching the storm that was her father unfold. And for the first time, she understood in a way children do that he was unstoppable, that he would burn everything in his path to protect her, to claim them both, to ensure the past never touched them again. The room became a symphony of chaos, the shattering of plates as he collided with one, the gunshot echoing and ricocheting, glass trembling in its frames, every movement deliberate yet fluid, the ballet of survival and vengeance orchestrated by a man who refused to let the past dictate the fate of his present. His vision remained red-tinted, focused solely on the threat, every sense heightened, yet in the corner of his eye, he saw Sarah shielding Binta, trembling yet strong, and he knew that his rage must also be precise, controlled, or the fragile life they had just reclaimed would shatter instantly. Michael lunged, fists colliding with flesh, boots connecting with knees, the air thick with tension and violence, the traitors scrambling, shocked by the speed and precision. And yet one raised the gun toward Binta again, slow, deliberate, almost taunting, and the world seemed to narrow into a single unbearable moment. His daughter's life hanging by a thread, the culmination of 5 years of longing, pain, and reunion, teetering on the edge of tragedy. Michael's eyes locked onto the gun, every nerve screaming, every memory of loss and love igniting his body into action, and in that heartbeat, he realized that the next second would decide everything: Binta's safety, their future, and whether the past would finally be buried or consume them all. The echo of betrayal and vengeance suspended in the air, waiting for the inevitable collision of fate and fury. 6. Michael's body moved before thought, before breath, before the instinct of fear could even touch him, a pure, primal reaction born from 5 years of absence, loss, and longing, from every scar etched into his flesh and soul, every night spent haunted by the memory of a daughter he never held, every second now demanding that he protect her at all costs. The gunshot erupted through the bakery, a deafening crack that shattered plates, glass, walls, and the fragile remnants of calm, the reverberation bouncing off every surface, every heartbeat amplified by the terror of the moment. Yet Michael's focus remained razor-sharp, eyes blazing with the fire of a father who had nothing left to lose, nothing more precious than the life of the child clutching her mother, eyes wide, tiny hands trembling. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, mingling with flour, sugar, and the faint aroma of freshly baked bread, creating a surreal battlefield in what had moments ago been a sanctuary, and every step Michael took radiated controlled violence, precision honed from years of survival in a world where hesitation meant death. Sarah's scream tore through the chaos, raw and piercing, calling Binta's name. The sound jagged with panic, and Michael's heart surged with unbearable urgency as he collided with the nearest traitor, shoulder slamming into chest, boots sliding across the wet floor as the man staggered back, shocked by the force and speed, unprepared for the fury Michael unleashed. Pain flared sharply along his arm as bullets ricocheted, a searing sting that would have brought a lesser man to his knees, yet he did not stop. Not with Sarah sobbing behind him, her arms wrapped around Binta, shaking with fear and helplessness, not with the little girl's terrified voice pleading, "Please don't die, sir." A voice that pierced deeper than any blade, deeper than any wound inflicted by enemies in the streets. The years of stolen love, of separation, of longing for a family he was only now reclaiming, roared inside him like a storm breaking loose, fueling every movement, every strike, every calculated response to the threat before him. Michael's eyes scanned rapidly, instincts guiding him like a shadow he had once been, a predator whose enemies never survived the first encounter. 2 men crumpled under his precision strikes, knees buckling, heads snapping back, unconscious or worse, while one staggered backward, blood staining his tailored shirt, fleeing into the storm outside, dragging his own fear and pain with him. Each movement was a combination of rage, skill, and paternal instinct, muscle memory honed by years of danger, yet guided by a father's love that refused to be anything less than total, absolute, and unstoppable. The air vibrated with chaos, the shattering of glass, the metallic ricochet of bullets, the sharp inhale of breath, the low growl of anger, and Michael's vision tunneled, every threat analyzed, every motion anticipated, every step a deadly dance choreographed by necessity. He pivoted sharply, dodging another swing, grabbing the nearest man, twisting with brutal efficiency, forcing him to the ground, and the sickening thud of impact resonated in the room, echoing off the walls, every sound magnified by adrenaline. Sarah's cries continued, Binta's grip tight on her mother, and Michael's chest heaved, his body burning with exertion and pain, blood trickling from a wound on his arm. Yet his mind remained focused, crystal clear, every second a calculation of survival and protection. He caught sight of Binta through the chaos, the tiny girl's eyes wide with fear and recognition, and a surge of determination unlike any he had ever felt before, ignited, burning hotter than gunpowder, sharper than steel. A sudden movement from the remaining threat drew his attention. Another gun leveled, another bullet fired. And Michael reacted without hesitation, rolling, striking, the room vibrating with motion, every surface a potential danger, every shadow a threat. Yet nothing could touch the two most precious lives before him. His fists collided with flesh, boots connected with knees, a symphony of controlled brutality, the sound of impact punctuated by shouts, screams, and the occasional metallic ping of a ricocheting bullet. Pain flared again along his arm, sharp and relentless, but he ignored it. The ache insignificant compared to the stakes, insignificant compared to the fire of protection that consumed his entire being. Sarah's hands clutched Binta, trembling, and yet in her eyes he saw a flicker of hope, a thread of trust, a fragile belief that he would not fail, and it drove him further, faster, harder, every strike fueled by love, vengeance, and the absolute refusal to let history repeat itself. The fleeing man crashed into a display, knocking pastries to the floor, a brief distraction that Michael exploited, spinning, striking, his body moving with a fluidity born of instinct, each motion deliberate, precise, lethal, and yet tethered to the singular goal of ensuring both Sarah and Binta survived. Time seemed to dilate, each second stretched to eternity, every breath measured against the chaos, every heartbeat echoing with anticipation, dread, and determination. And in the middle of the storm, Michael's mind burned with clarity. No one, not the syndicate, not the traitors, not fate itself, would take his family from him now. He felt the burn of pain radiating from his arm, sweat mixing with blood, clothes damp with rain and effort, yet he pressed forward, unstoppable, a man reborn in fury and love, a father who would meet any threat with the full force of his being. And then, finally, after a blur of motion, muscle, and steel, the remaining assailants neutralized or fleeing, Michael stood amid the wreckage, plates shattered, chairs overturned, the smell of gunpowder and fear heavy in the air, blood dripping from his arm, chest heaving, eyes blazing like fire forged in the crucible of vengeance and love, every scar, every memory, every moment of lost time culminating in a vow etched into his very soul. Sarah rushed to him, hands trembling, her voice barely a whisper through tears. "Michael, you're hurt." And Michael, still breathing hard, blood mixing with rain and sweat, leaned slightly, voice low, rough with effort and emotion, "Not enough to lose you again." And in those words, every fear, every pain, every moment of the last 5 years was concentrated. Every instinct of survival and love converging into a single, unbreakable promise. Nothing, no one, would ever come between them again. The storm outside battered the bakery, but inside, amidst shattered glass, overturned tables, and the lingering echo of bullets, Michael's gaze swept the shadows, the adrenaline still pulsing, knowing that while this battle was won, the war for their safety, for their future, was far from over, and that the enemies he had once defeated would not rest until he had paid every debt of blood, loyalty, and betrayal that the past had demanded. 7. Michael sank to his knees, muscles screaming in protest, exhaustion weighing on every fiber of his body, sweat and blood still clinging to his skin, the aftermath of chaos and violence pressing down on him like a physical force. And in that moment of total vulnerability, Binta, her small frame trembling but determined, ran into his arms, wrapping herself tightly around him, her tiny hands clutching his coat, her face pressed against his chest. And the words she uttered next struck him harder than any bullet ever could, slicing through the storm of his mind, the weight of years, the scars of battles both fought and survived. "Are you okay, Dad?" The single word, simple, innocent, pure, melted every broken part of him, each fragment of grief, loss, and regret dissolving in its warmth. And for the first time in 5 long years, Michael felt whole in a way that had nothing to do with power or fear, but everything to do with love, protection, and belonging. He held her close, arms wrapped around her fragile body, tears burning his eyes. Unheeded, uncontrolled, each one a testament to a man who had lost, searched, and finally found the greatest treasures of his life. Sarah knelt beside them, her hands shaking as they reached for his face, fingertips grazing his bloodied skin. Her touch both gentle and trembling with the weight of what she had carried alone, and her voice, raw with emotion, trembled as she whispered, "I'm so sorry I ran from you." A confession loaded with years of pain, fear, love, and sacrifice, a truth that had been too heavy for her alone, and yet in the curve of her shoulders, in the tilt of her head, Michael saw strength, resilience, and a love that had never faltered, that had survived fire, betrayal, and absence. He grabbed her wrist gently, his hand warm and firm against her trembling skin, and in his eyes she saw not blame but understanding, not anger but endless, unwavering love. "You didn't run from me. You saved our daughter," he said, voice low, gravelly, trembling with relief, fury, and tenderness all at once. "And that makes you the bravest woman I've ever loved." Words that carried the weight of 5 lost years, 5 years stolen by fear and enemies, and yet redeemed in that instant by the reunion of the family he had longed for every single day. Sarah sobbed into his shoulder, body shaking as she allowed herself to finally release all the years of pent-up pain, guilt, and fear, and Michael pulled her into an embrace 5 years overdue, holding her as if the world could not touch them here, as if the horrors of the past, the betrayals, the violence, and the losses could be contained in the walls of this bakery, leaving them untouched and safe, if only for a moment. His lips brushed the top of her head, fingers running through her hair, and he whispered, voice low but full of absolute resolve, "No more running, no more hiding. I choose you both, forever." Words that carried a vow deeper than any blood oath, heavier than any promise made in darkness, a declaration that nothing, no one, would ever separate them again. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, a reminder that the world beyond the bakery remained dangerous. Yet inside, the chaos was replaced with quiet, fragile, unbroken joy. Michael kissed Sarah with the passion of a man who had nearly lost the only 2 people who mattered in the universe, a kiss that spoke of regret, relief, desire, and the promise of unending devotion, and she responded in kind, pressing into him, letting herself feel the safety, the love, the belonging she had fought for all these years. Binta laughed softly, hugging both of their legs, tiny arms wrapping around them, giggles erupting amidst tears, a sound that melted the final edges of fear from Michael's heart, and he held them both as if letting go even for a second could undo everything he had finally reclaimed. He looked at their faces, at the delicate curve of Binta's cheeks, the bright gleam of life and trust in her eyes, the softness of Sarah's features still marred by recent fear, but lit with relief and love. And Michael's chest swelled, tears flowing freely now, unrestrained, washing away the years of pain, vengeance, and solitude, leaving only warmth, protection, and unyielding devotion. Every past mistake, every loss, every second spent apart crystallized into this singular, perfect moment, and he vowed silently that nothing would ever steal this from him again. The storm outside raged on, rain hammering against the windows, lightning flashing across the city, but inside, the world was quiet, suspended, a bubble of love, reunion, and promise. Michael tightened his arms around Sarah and Binta, holding them as one, his lips brushing her temple once more, whispering words meant for no one but them. This time, I'm not letting anything tear us apart. And the echo of those words felt eternal, absolute, the weight of their meaning sinking deep into their hearts, a promise carved into the very air of the bakery. For the first time in 5 years, they breathed as one, hearts aligned, souls intertwined, the fractures of the past beginning to heal under the warmth of love, finally, fully realized. The bakery, once a place of refuge and sweetness, now held the story of reunion, survival, and redemption. Broken plates and scattered chairs bore witness to the battle fought and won, but the strongest proof of victory was not the destruction around them. It was the unbroken family in the center of the chaos, holding one another, safe, alive, and together. Michael's gaze swept over Binta and Sarah, drinking in every detail, memorizing every curve of their faces, every tiny gesture, as if committing to memory a treasure he would never lose again. He finally stood, lifting Binta into his arms with ease despite exhaustion, the little girl giggling, resting her head on his shoulder, her tiny hands clutching him as he held her close, and Sarah linked her arm with his, leaning against him as though finally finding a balance she had long denied herself. Their steps slow but steady, hearts synchronized in the quiet rhythm of survival and love. They walked toward the bakery door together, the world outside dark and uncertain, sirens wailing, shadows lingering, yet none of it mattered, for inside their embrace they carried a shield no force could break, a family reunited and stronger for all it had endured. As they stepped into the storm, rain soaking them, wind whipping around their bodies, Michael held them close, every step a declaration that fear, enemies, and the past would no longer dictate their lives, that they walked now not in terror but in triumph, love and unshakable unity, ready to rebuild the life stolen from them, to reclaim every stolen moment, and to live fully, without compromise, without running, without hiding. The city loomed around them, lights flickering in puddles, streets glistening with rain, but Michael, Sarah, and Binta moved forward together, hearts intertwined, the promise of forever pulsing in every step, a story of fire, loss, redemption, and above all, love that had survived time, betrayal, and the unthinkable. The past had chased them, but it had not won. Now only the future lay ahead, a life reborn, a family complete, and a love finally unbroken. As they disappeared into the night, rain-slicked streets reflecting the promise of tomorrow, Michael whispered once more to himself and them, a vow carrying the weight of every scar and every heartbeat. This time, nothing. Nothing will tear us apart. And for the first time in years, every shadow, every danger, every loss felt finally conquered, leaving only love, only family, and the unyielding hope of forever. And that was the story of Michael, Sarah, and little Binta, proof that love can survive even the darkest shadows. If you felt their pain, their hope, their love, press that like button, subscribe to Heartwoven Tales, and hit the bell icon to never miss a story that touches your heart.